Uh, but it's a non-violent organization, and its places of worship have been have been closed on the basis of a court decision. And this, in a democratic state, in fact, constitutes one of the most serious interferences with freedom of religion or belief. Such measures, in fact, uh, not only affect the legal existence of a religious organization, but also the spiritual and communal life of its members. So it is a fundamental right to have a legal entity and to have the possibility to meet together, to enjoy freedom of association, freedom of assembly, freedom of worship. And when there is a problem with the state, there must be a proportionality principle that must be respected. In this case, well, we can doubt that there was any form of proportionality that should have been respected in Japan. In 1995, another group, a religious group, Aum Shinrikyo, blending elements of Buddhism, Hinduism, perpetrated a sarin gas attack, if you remember, if some of you may remember, in the Tokyo subway. It was never banned, although it killed 14 people and injured thousands of them. The founder, Shoko Ashara, and 12 other members were personally prosecuted, but their association was not dissolved. The group survived under another name called Aleph, and when I was once in Tokyo, I could visit that group. Of course, it was under police surveillance. At the beginning of the street, there was a barrier, and then outside the building, the police was present with the pictures of all those members. But I could have access to them, and they were never dissolved. The Unification Church has never committed any bomb attempt or gas terrorist attack. So it never advocated or justified violence, but it is banned. Democratic states may therefore intervene when a religious association engages in criminal conduct, incites violence, promotes hatred, or seriously infringes upon the rights of its members. But this was not the case with the Unification Church in Japan. And the dissolution of a non-violent religious association raises really particular concerns. International bodies, including the United Nations, the European Court of Human Rights, have repeatedly emphasized that peaceful religious activity enjoys strong protection. It's not the case in Japan. Mere unpopularity or unconventional beliefs or social disapproval cannot justify a dissolution. States must demonstrate that less restrictive measures, such as fines, administrative sanctions, or prosecution of individual offenders, would be insufficient. The complete dissolution of a religious association is an extreme and irrevocable measure that affects and sanctions all the members of the religious community. The closure of places of worship can have profound consequences on the believers. First, it restricts their ability to practice their faith collectively. Worship is often a communal activity that reinforces religious identity, provides spiritual support, and fosters social solidarity. Losing access to a place of worship may therefore significantly impair believers' religious life. Second, dissolution can produce serious social and psychological effects. Members may experience stigmatization, isolation, fear, particularly when the group is publicly labeled as a dangerous or illegitimate cult. Such measures may also disrupt charitable, educational, and cultural activities conducted by the religious community at home, but also in other countries. For minority religions, closure may threaten the very survival of the community by preventing the transmission of beliefs and traditions for the next generations. And third, believers may suffer violations of additional human rights, including freedom of association, expression, property rights, and in some circumstances, dissolution can lead to loss of employment, housing, or social networks, especially when members are closely connected through religious activities. Until now, it was believed that dissolution or prohibition of a religious association and massive closures of places of worship were only bad practices in dictatorial and authoritarian countries like Russia or China. But with the ruling of the Supreme Court in Japan, the country has opened a Pandora box because other countries, including in Europe, are looking at Japan. They are looking at Japan to see how, in their specific context, they could envisage this dissolution of some religious groups that they don't like. Concrete example, in 2024, the Czech Republic launched a procedure aiming at the liquidation of Jehovah's Witnesses. This attempt was under close scrutiny of other EU countries, and not only anti-cult groups, I can tell you. People from administrations dealing with, in governments and dealing with religious issues. They were also eager to see how they could, through legal channels, under cover of legal channels, I would say, get rid of Jehovah's Witnesses. There was a second attempt in Norway until a few months ago. So the danger is at our doors. It's not on the other side of the planet. Now, with the circulation, the quick circulation of information, everything that happens anywhere in the world can have an impact on the other side of the world. Fortunately, in the case of the Czech Republic, there was an outcry of human rights defenders and defenders of religious freedom in Europe. And we, our organization, Human Rights Without Frontiers, collected the signatures of 15 European academics pressing the Czech authorities to abandon that project. And 8 months ago, the Czech authorities announced they were dropping the liquidation procedure. But the liquidation procedure is now at our doors in Europe and concerning people, concerning groups, religious groups that authorities don't like. Okay, I will keep it my introductory presentation to this general overview. And now I think that we will see a video, and then I will give the floor to our first speaker. Thank you.
代教会長という任務を受けております。私は400名の信徒の人生に寄り添い、そして共に祈り、その心の安らぎとまた救いに導くために日々歩んでおります。3月4日起きた内容を共有させていただきたいと思います。あの日、午前10時から私たちは教会で東京高裁の判決を伝える YouTube 中継を見守っておりました。信者たちと共に祈りながら、司法が公正な良識ある判断を下すことを信じておりました。しかし、11時15分、抗告棄却。家庭連合の顧問弁護士からその言葉を聞いた瞬間、礼拝堂は静まり返りました。 すすり泣く声さえも聞こえない重苦しい沈黙でした。私もまた思考が止まるほどの衝撃を受けました。これから信徒たちをどう守ればいいのかという考えが頭をめぐり、動悸が激しくなり、足が震えました。驚くべきはそのわずか15分後です。11時30分、まだ中継すら終わっていないその時、教会スタッフが血相を変えて飛び込んできました。清算人の代理人が15人来ています。すでに部屋に上がっています。判決からわずか15分後です。心の準備どころか、判決内容を精査する、その時間さえ与えられませんでした。部屋に向かうと、スーツを着た十数人の代理人、清算人の代理人が、すでに部屋で座って待っておりました。彼らは私に対し、事務的にこう告げました。この建物、資産、銀行口座、すべて清算人の管理下にある。今日中にすべての教会の鍵と口座を引き渡し、退去してください。皆様が愛する寺院や教会、これがある日突然、判決から15分で見知らぬ人々によって今すぐ出て行けと命じられる光景を想像してみてください。それは単なる不動産の差し押さえではなく、私たちの魂の拠り所が土足で踏みにじられた瞬間でありました。私は一つだけ清算人に交渉しました。それは翌日、翌々日と長年教会に尽くしてこられた信徒の葬儀が予定されていたからです。交渉の結果、清算人の代理人は、葬儀は相当特別な措置であるとして、しぶしぶながらも実施を認めました。しかし、そこで突きつけられた条件は、宗教家として屈辱的なものでした。岡光さんは、教代職員としてではなく、教会長としてではなく、一信徒として葬儀を行ってください。私は愕然としました。信徒の最後を看取り、神のもとへ送り出すのは、牧師としての私の天職です。しかし、清算人はそれを認めず、私の肩書を剥ぎ取り、一人の信徒として振る舞うことを強要したのです。遺族の悲しみを癒し、儀礼を司る宗教指導者としての尊厳は、法的な清算手続きの名のもとに否定されました。さらに、葬儀の現場でも、信教の自由への無理解が続きました。葬儀に来られたある信徒が、祈祷室でお祈りをしたいと、祈祷室で祈らせてほしいと願い出たとき、清算人の代理人はこう言いました。許可できるのは礼拝堂での葬儀のみだ。ここで祈ってはいけない。祈祷室は信徒が神と深く対話する聖域です。それさえも許可がなければ許されない。真心を込めて個人を送り出したいという信仰者としての、人としての当然の願いがことごとく制約を受けました。後日、その信徒の40日追悼礼拝、 仏教でいう四十九日、これも教会で行うことができず、親族の自宅でひっそりと行いました。その方は25年以上も教会に通い、教会で結婚式にあたる祝福式といいます。祝福式を挙げた方でした。なぜ最後のお別れを親しんだ教会でさせてあげられないのか。私は個人に対し申し訳なさで涙が止まりませんでした。高裁判決は信教の自由は妨げない。宗教活動も継続可能だと言います。また、世間の一部からは、祈るだけであれば、どこでも祈ることはできるという声も聞こえてきます。しかし、信仰を持つ皆様ならお分かりいただけるはずです。宗教にとって、その場所が持つ宗教の固有的意義を、どれほどにその意義が重いかということを、新宿家庭教会は私たちが尊敬してやまない教祖の家族が自ら足を運び、祈りを捧げてくださった代わりのきかない聖域です。信徒たちにとっては、年配者には人生を捧げた居場所であり、子供たちにとっては神様の愛を肌で感じることのできる遊び場であり、青年たちにとっては自らのアイデンティティを育んだふるさとです。これらは近隣の貸し会議室を借りれば済むという話ではありません。結婚式や葬式といった人生の最重要の儀礼を自らの信仰の拠点で行いたいと願うことは、特定の宗教に限らない人間としての根源的な権利ではないでしょうか。今の日本で起きていることは、法の名を借りた魂の重訴、不貞を強いる行為だと感じております。形としての信仰は許しても、その根拠地を奪い、コミュニティを解体する。これが果たして信教の自由の保護、保障と呼べるのでしょうか。信仰とは、決して個人の内心だけにとどまるものではありません。場所があり、儀礼があり、共に集う共同体があって初めて、信仰は生きる力となります。祈祷室で祈ることを禁じられ、礼拝堂から追い出され、牧師としての名乗りさえ奪われた私たちの現実にどうか目を向けてください。これが民主主義国家である日本が目指した姿なのでしょうか。ここにお集まりの皆様、今日私たち家庭連合に起きていることは、明日皆様の持つ宗教に起きないという保証はありません。国家が公共の福祉という名目で宗教団体の内部に土足で踏み込み、その資産と場所を奪う前例が今作られようとしています。私は一宗教者としてどんなに困難であったとしても、信徒の心に寄り添い続けることを誓います。しかし、公正かつ公平な司法の判断がなければ、これまで日本の歴史において必死に守ってきた信教の自由という灯火は日本から消えてしまうのです。皆様の温かいご支援と祈りに心から感謝申し上げます。ご清聴ありがとうございました。
Yes, and thank you, Pastor Kimihiro Okamitsu, for your very moving testimony. And it shows the impact not only globally on a religious community, but on families, on individuals who are not able to meet for important events in their lives, such as baptisms, weddings, and in the case that they exposed, funerals. This is really, really tragic. And that reminds me that another example, uh, unfortunately not a good example for Japan because it's a non-democratic country, Rwanda, where 14,000 places of worship were closed by the authorities. Also, this was politically motivated, and I was interviewed last week about this case by La Croix in France, which is a well-known Catholic media, and he was talking to me about Japan. uh, is it justified, he asked me, to dissolve religious associations? And he gave the example of Japan. So you see the impact of what is happening now in what has happened now in Tokyo with that decision of the Supreme Court. It's really, I would not say it's a tsunami, but it's a huge storm that will reach other countries and put a number of religious minorities in a very difficult situation. And now I am very pleased to introduce our next speaker, Mr. Norishige Kondo, the former director of the Family Federation, which is the official name of the Unification Church for World for World Peace. So he was a former is the former director of the legal department of the Family Federation. The floor is yours. You will have a PowerPoint, I think. Huh?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. My name is Norishige Kondo. In Japan, the government requested the dissolution of the Unification Church. On June 22nd, the Supreme Court dismissed the church's appeal and the dissolution decision became final. Today, I'd like to briefly explain the cause and the key problems with the dissolution decision. Firstly, about the Unification Church. The Unification Church was founded in 1954 in Seoul, Korea. Its founders were Reverend Samyeon Moon and Dr. Hakjae-han Moon. The Japanese church was founded in 1959. It obtained religious cooperation status in Japan in 1964. It changed the official name to the Family Federation for World Peace and Unification in 2015. For convenience, I'll refer to the organization as the Unification Church or simply UC throughout this presentation. On July 8, 2022, former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe was assassinated, and it was reported that the suspect's motive was a grudge against the church. On July 12th, an anti-unification church lawyers group began to hold press conferences. They denounced the UC as a great evil and created the impression as if serious harm caused by the church was continuing throughout Japan. The media attacked conservative lawmakers who had ties with UC, and they were compelled to hold apology press conferences. Originally, the government should keep neutrality. However, they encountered severe pressure and finally began to take extraordinary politics one after another. August 31st, then Prime Minister Kishida proclaimed to cut ties with UC. October 19th, he changed the interpretation of a requirement for dissolution of religious cooperation over one night and said that civil torts can be grounds for dissolution. October 13th in 2023, the government requested for dissolution of the UC to the court. On March 25th last year, the Tokyo District Court issued a dissolution decision against the UC. However, it ignored repeated recommendations from the Human Rights Committee and violated the ICCPR. UNOHCHR issued a press release October 1st last year, warning that the decision may violate the ICCPR. However, the Tokyo High Court ignored the press release and dismissed the UC's appeal on March 4th in this year. June 22nd, the Supreme Court dismissed the UC's appeal, making the dissolution decision final. The court's fact-finding is also highly problematic. Even if civil torts were considered grounds for dissolution, the number of torts cases declined from 2009, and there were few torts cases remaining at the time of the dissolution litigation. So the Tokyo District Court found torts cases based on not only civil judgments, but also settlements in and out of court. Even so, the total amount declined to 5% after 2009. So the court found torts based on speculation without any concrete facts or evidence, even after 2009, saying there must be a non-harms. Though it was a profound violation of the principle of judgment based on evidence, the Tokyo High Court and the Supreme Court endorsed it. Before 2009, it is true that the UC lost many civil lawsuits in torts cases. However, more than 60% of the plaintiffs were ex-members who had been deprogrammed, who had not choice but to testify in accordance with the deprogrammer's allegation. A former anti-UC lawyer testified about unwritten rules in litigation. If it is a cult, it loses. Claims that would never be accepted in ordinary litigation are upheld when the defendant is a cult. As a result, courts accepted ex-believers' allegations that they made donations through deception or intimidation based on ancestral sins or spiritual misfortune. However, more recently, one of the attorneys from the anti-UC lawyers group with the longest experience in litigation against the UC stated clearly in a keynote that UC members' solicitation of donation doesn't involve in deception or intimidation. It became clear that the court have issued judgments based on fabricated facts. Just after the Tokyo High Court decision, liquidation procedures began. Access to 300 church facilities were prohibited. Consequently, believers were unable to conduct Sunday services, weekday prayer meetings, and various other religious ceremonies, including funerals and weddings, using church facilities. 1,400 church workers were prohibited from engaging in religious activities during working hours. 900 were fired on May 20th, and the remaining 500 workers will be fired later. Several believers, having been denied their freedom of religion by the state, were driven to suicidal thoughts. The Supreme Court held that a dissolution decision merely deprives a religious organization of its religious status and does not itself prohibit the religious activities of believers. On that basis, it concluded that a dissolution decision doesn't infringe upon freedom of religion. However, this situation is nothing less than state-sponsored religious persecution. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for this detailed presentation with statistics that show the magnitude of that phenomenon and tragedy. What I had forgotten to say during my introductory words is that I will give you the opportunities after each speaker to ask questions, but I will only take 3 questions, and then at the end there will be a question and answer that concerns all the speakers. So, are there any questions for Mr. Norishige Kondo? Yes.
Mr. Kondo, did you and your colleagues...
Oh, yeah, minute. Yeah. Sorry. Microphone.
Yes, Michael Balcom from London. Did you and your colleagues have any belief that the court system of Japan would give you a fair trial? Or were you convinced from the start that a fair hearing was very unlikely?
Did you hope to have a fair hearing, or were you convinced from the beginning that you couldn't have a fair hearing?
Okay. Yeah, actually, there were unfair judgment during the court case before the dissolution case. However, as for the dissolution case, it is the result is very serious. That's why we hoped that the court will issue fair judgment, as if it is a criminal case. If it is a criminal case, the judgment is very careful. After careful hearing, they issue the judgment. So we hoped same kind of careful litigation. However, it was far from our expectation. This is our feeling.
If I may add something, what he means is that there were civil cases before where they saw that the courts were not impartial at all, and that they were completely partial, but they hoped that a dissolution is a very serious matter, so they hoped that it would be treated differently. But unfortunately, and it's at the national level, so it's the state, it's administrative court, but it was treated as a non-contentious trial, so meaning it was non-public. It was it was a trial, but not public and not no due process. So you see, it was a kind of a process that had no guarantees of a fair trial. Yeah, right.
Yes.
Okay, there was a second question. I think I had seen another hand that had been raised. No? Okay, then, yes, on the right. Microphone, please. Over there.
Is it working? Yeah. Okay. I'm a journalist, so I have to be absolutely sure of what I heard, and I might not have heard correctly. Something you said about the Supreme Court having saying that they have deprived an organization of its religious status, and thus it cannot act, and thus it's not a hit to freedom of religion. What was the last thing you said about this, please?
Yeah, the
Thank you.
reasoning of the Supreme Court is that the legal effect of the dissolution is only the deprivation of legal status as a religious corporation. And believers can do their practice, religious practice, even after the dissolution. That's why the dissolution decision would not infringe the freedom of religion of believers. This is a Supreme Court ruling.
Okay, thank you. One more question there at the back.
Of human rights, because Article 18 says that not just practice your belief, but you can also, you cannot just believe what you want, but you can also practice your belief in daily life. So actually, this is contrary to this principle of human rights, religious freedom. Would you agree with that?
What religion is, and it's it's on purpose that the court said that, but it's not respecting freedom of religion. That's what he says basically.
Yeah, what you said is right. So the court tried to narrow the meaning of religious freedom. However, we think that the religious freedom should include the practice of religion, including gathering together and offer prayer or join Sunday services. And we need facilities for gathering. If we got rid of such kind of facilities, it is very difficult for us to gather together. For example, if we wish to have a night prayer, it is very difficult to find out a facility which lend us such a facility in midnight. This is a very clear example. Anyway, in the result of court decision, every properties were got rid of, and the properties were built by the donation of the believers. So the most suffering people is the believers due to the court decision. This is the contradiction. Though the court says that it needs to protect believers from improper donation, but actually it harmed believers so much. That's it. You are welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much for those clarifications. And now I would like to introduce you another personality who made some investigation about the case, but as an outsider. She's not a member of the church. She's a journalist, totally independent, and she started to dig behind the screen what was really happening with this case in court. So I'm very honored to introduce you Mrs. Masumi Fukuda, who wrote a book, and you have a summary of the book on your table. And she will, of course, speak in Japanese with a translator. What was behind this case, in fact?
忙しい時間を割いてここに集まっていただいた皆様ありがとうございます。私は今ご紹介いただきましたように日本から参りました福田真澄というフリーランスのジャーナリストです。で、今やはりご紹介に預かったように私は全く信者ではありません。一般の、特にその何か宗教を信じているということは全くない、フリーランスのジャーナリストです。昨年の11月に、国家の生贄という本を上梓しました。 これは2022年の末からある月刊誌に不定期連載した記事を、加筆修正してまとめたノンフィクションの書籍です。
So, thank you for coming. Sorry. Thank you everybody for coming despite your busy schedule. Sorry. I am Masumi Fukuda, as introduced by the chairman, a freelance journalist from Japan. And indeed, I'm not a member of the Unification Church and totally independent journalist. Last November, I published a book titled A Sacrifice to Nation, a non-fiction book. This complied from articles I regularly published in a monthly magazine from since 2022 with additional additions and revisions.
少し、私自身の紹介をさせていただきますけれども、現在までに、この国家の生贄を含めて7冊の本を出版しております。その中ででっち上げというノンフィクション、私は常にノンフィクションを書いているわけですけれども、これまでに23万部を売り上げるベストセラーとなって大きな賞もいただき、昨年映画化されました。今年ネットフリックスでも上映されまして、日本映画部門で2週連続第1位になっております。一昨年には、宗教に関連した優れた作品に与えられる米国のウィルバー賞をいただいております。
So may I introduce myself a little bit? I have published 7 books until now, including this one that I'm introducing you now. Also, one of these 7 books is also non-fiction books. I have been specialized in non-fiction books, and it's called Dechiage, in English, fabrication. It became bestseller with 230,000 copies sold and winning major awards, and it was made into a film last year, and from this year it's broadcasted in Netflix and scored number 1 in Japanese film category for 2 consecutive weeks. The year before last, I received a Wilbur Award in the United States, which is given to outstanding work on religious field.
最新刊のこの国家の生贄を読んだ方々からは大変驚愕の声が上がっております。国民の目が届かないところでとんでもない悪事が繰り広げられていた。マスコミが語らない真実がここにある。必読である。真実が詰まっている。などなどですが、おそらく私がこの分厚いこの本ですが、この本の中で書いたことは一般の国民にとってはほぼ初めて聞くことばかりだと思います。しかし紛れもなくこれは真実です。表紙をめくるとそこには、もちろん日本語ですが、真実から目を背けてはいけないという言葉がここに、中に入ってここに書かれて、おります。この本は旧統一教会についてのルポルタージュです。
So regarding this, my newest recent book, A Sacrifice to the Nation, this one, I have expressed, many readers have expressed astonishment. Actually, comments that I received include outrageous evil deeds have been committed in secret places. The truth that the media doesn't talk about is here. It is a must-read book, and it is full of truth. It is really true. I suppose that most of what I have written is indeed in this thick book is all true. And most of the Japanese people, it is for the first time they have seen this truth. But all are indeed undeniably true, I have to emphasize. When you turn this cover page of this thick book, you will find a quote. Don't turn a blind eye to the truth. I wrote this book about the Unification Church.
今日ここで私がお伝えしたいのは、まさにこの本の内容です。皆さんは日本という国を民主主義、自由主義が根付き、信教の自由などさまざまな人権が保障された高度な先進国であると認識していらっしゃると思います。しかし現在の日本は、そうではありません。信教の自由が侵害され、立憲主義、法治主義の根幹が揺らぎ、民主主義が危機を迎えています。
So by this given occasion, I'd like to introduce you the content of this book. You probably perceive Japan as a highly developed country where democracy and liberty are deeply rooted, and various human rights, including freedom of religion, are of course guaranteed. However, present-day Japan is no longer like that. Freedom of religion is being violated. The foundation of the constitutionalism and the rule of law is being shaken, and democracy is facing a grave crisis. You might be wondering, what's happening in Japan?
今まで、お話しいただいた方たちのお話と重複する部分は、多いと思うんですけれども、まずその旧統一教会、今の名前は世界平和統一家庭連合という韓国由来の、宗教団体の お話です。2015年までの旧名は、世界キリスト教統一神霊協会、略称統一教会。私も皆さんに馴染みのある統一教会の名称を用いてお話ししたいと思います。なお、先ほどもご紹介に預かりましたが、何回も強調いたしますが、私は信者ではなく全くの一般人です。
So there is a religious organization that we are talking about. This organization is of Korean origin. It's called formally nowadays it's called the Family Federation for World Peace and Unification. Until 2015 in Japan, its formerly name was Holy Spirit Association for the Unification of World Christianity. Abbreviation was the Unification Church. By this conference, I'd like to share this name because it is most known by most of you. And by this occasion, again, I would repeat again that, and I'd like to emphasize, I am not a believer of this Unification Church, but a really completely ordinary, neutral person.
先ほどもご説明がありましたけれども、すでに現在この宗教法人については、清算手続きが開始されました。本部をはじめ全国の教会すべてが清算法人の管理下に置かれて封鎖され、信徒たちは一切教会に立ち入ることができなくなりました。つまり信徒たちは教会に集うことができなくなり、礼拝その他の儀式の場所を奪われてしまったのです。また全国で2000名近くいる教団の職員はすでにその多くが清算法人から解雇されました。再就職が極めて難しいということはお分かりいただけると思います。
As explained earlier, the liquidation proceedings have already begun, and this began for this religious corporation. The headquarters and all the church buildings have been placed under the control of the liquidation authorities and sealed off, preventing believers from entering their own churches. In other words, believers can no longer gather at their own churches and have been deprived of places for worship and rituals. Furthermore, many of the nearly 2,000 staff members of the church nationwide have already been laid off, fired by the liquidation organization, you can easily imagine how extremely difficult for them to find a new job.
安倍元首相、日本の偉大な首相、最初でした。その方が暗殺されて以降、一般のその旧統一教会の信者さんたちにとってみたら思いもよらないことが起こりました。一般の信徒たちもさまざまな迫害差別を受けています。自殺した信徒もいますし、職場でこの統一教会の信徒であるということが知られてしまって解雇された人、学校で教師が統一教会は悪い宗教だと生徒たちに教えているのを聞いて大変ショックを受けた学生、地方自治体に対する善意のボランティア活動をすべて断られた信徒団体などで、教団には多数の脅迫電話、脅迫状が殺到し、教団施設にカルトと大きな字で落書きされたこともあります。インターネットや SNS は一時教団への誹謗中傷一色になりました。
Since the former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, one of the greatest politicians of Japan, since then, the ordinary members of the Unification Church have also faced various forms of persecution and discrimination. Some members have committed suicide, unfortunately. Others have been fired from their jobs after their affiliation with the church is discovered at their workplaces. And some students were shocked to hear their own teachers talking to the class that Unification Church is a bad religion. And some volunteer groups of the church were denied from the local government of their continuous volunteer work. The church buildings has been the church has been inundated with numerous number of the threatening telephone calls and letters, and also their facilities have been cladded by the word like a cult. And also for a time, the internet and social medias are completely filled with slander and defamation against the church.
特に深刻なのは、教団の職員に対する差別でして、アパートがもう借りられない、アパートの契約延長を断られた、クレジットカードの利用を断られた、病院で受診しようとしたら、保険証にこの教団の名前が明記されているために受診を断られるというような事態も起きております。
But the situation of particularly is serious for the staff members of the church. Many of them were lost a house or couldn't extend their apartment contract, couldn't find a new housing, and also their credit card are blocked because of their working for the Unification Church. And even some are denied of the medical treatment in the hospital, because in their insurance card states clearly printed they're working at the Unification Church.
先ほども申し上げましたように、日本は信教の自由を保障している国です。すると、この統一教会という宗教法人は、よっぽど何かすごく悪いことをして解散命令を受けたのでしょうか。日本で1990年代に起きた、先ほどもちょっとお話がありましたが、オウム真理教の事件をご存知の方も多いと思います。1995年、東京の地下鉄でサリンを散布し、他の事件を合わせて、死者が29人、重軽傷者6000人近くを出して、教祖や幹部が殺人罪で、執行されました。当然これだけの被害を出したのですから、オウム真理教は解散命令を受けました。
As I mentioned, it was mentioned earlier, Japan is a country that guarantees freedom of religion. So, did this Unification Church commit such a terrible crime to receive dissolution order? Many of you are probably familiar with the religious organization Om Shinrikyo incident that occurred in Japan in 1990s. In 1995, sarin gas was sprayed by them in a Tokyo metro subway, and the 29 people lost their lives, and also 6,000 people were gravely injured. And after this incident, their founder and leaders were executed for murder. And naturally, given the extent of the damage caused Om Shinrikyo, they are worthy to be dissolved.
それでは統一教会もオウム真理教と同様の極悪宗教団体なのでしょうか。同じように大量殺人を犯したのでしょうか。いや、これは全く違います。統一教会は組織として一件の刑事事件も犯してはおらず、幹部はもとより数万人いる信徒の誰一人として殺人はおろか傷害事件も犯しておりません。
So, is the Unification Church a wicked religion, a group like Om Shinrikyo? Did they commit mass murder in the subway? No, they are not. The Unification Church, in fact, as an organization, has no criminal past, and not a single criminal offense, and not a single one of its leaders, nor even any one of its tens of thousands of followers has committed murder, nor the even single assault case.
ではなぜ旧統一教会は解散なのでしょうか。なんと主に献金の問題だけで解散を命じられたのです。献金は宗教団体にとって必要不可欠なものです。ところが裁判所の判決では社会常識や社会通念の範囲を超えた高額献金を教団が受け取ることは違法というふうにされました。少し前までは先祖因縁や地獄の話によって畏怖誤信させられて、献金させられた、脅されてということですね。献金させられたという、認定が、定番でした。
Then why the dissolution to the Unification Church? Surprisingly, the dissolution was ordered primarily due to the issue of donations. Donations are essential for religious organizations. However, the court ruling decided it illegal for the Unification Church to accept the donations that exceeded the bounds of common sense and social norms. Until recently, the standard explanation was that donors were forced or threatened into making donations through the fear and misconception based on stories like ancestors' karma and hell.
過去こうした民事裁判が、統一教会に対して多数起こされ、その多くの裁判で、統一教会は敗訴しました。なんでこうした民事裁判が多数起こされたかについては後で説明をいたします。ここでこれらの裁判の、詳しい、論評は避けますけれども、今避けます。詳しい論評は避けますけれども、多くの事例で原告側に確たる証拠がなくても原告が勝訴するケースが多く、不当判決が積み重なっています。
So in the past, the huge number of civil lawsuits like these have been filed against the Unification Church, and why so many, I will explain it to you later on. But the Unification Church has lost most of them. while I would refrain from going into the detail about these civil torts here, in many instances, the plaintiff have won even without concrete evidence if it's against the Unification Church, resulting in a growing number of unjust judgments.
これは日本の裁判官たちのほぼ 100% が信仰を持っておらず、統一教会のような新宗教をカルトとして偏見の目で見ているからではないかと思われます。あるいはメディアが統一教会をカルトとして非難している中で、統一教会を勝訴させたら裁判所の信用を保てないということかもしれません。さらに最近は、信者自身が自由意志で献金をしたと思い込んでいるが、実は教団から不当な心理的影響を受けていることに気づかないでいるから、それも違法と認定しなければならないとする、ちょっととんでもない判決まで下されています。つまりその信仰を持つこと自体が被害であるとするものに近く、実質的にマインドコントロール理論を認める判断だと言えます。
So this is quite likely because almost 100% of Japanese judges have no religious faith and likely view new religions like the Unification Church with prejudice, viewing them as a cult. Otherwise, maybe, or it might be that with the media condemning the Unification Church so much as a cult, victory for the Unification Church would result into the undermine the credibility of the judiciary system. Furthermore, recently, even there have been even the ruling saying that while believers themselves make donations willingly, their own free will, but they are actually under the control of the subjected to undue psychological influence from the church side. And therefore, their donations must be considered to be illegal. This is nearly claiming that having faith itself is an illegal act. It is based on the theory of mind control.
これらの、敗訴判決に加え、今回の解散命令の事件では、驚くべきことに、この解散命令の判決についてですが、驚くべきことに、教団が元信者との間に行った和解や示談まで教団が不法行為をしている証拠だとして今回の解散命令、裁判認定されてしまい、統一教会は解散命令を受けました。つまり教団と元信者の間で高額献金をめぐる紛争を解決する手段に過ぎなかった民事裁判の結果が解散命令の根拠とされたのです。
So in addition, if we look at the recent ruling for the dissolution order, it goes so far, astonishingly, even the legal settlement and agreement that the church had reached with the former members were recognized and considered to be evidence of illegal activity. Thus, the Unification Church was ordered to dissolve because of that. In other words, the results of the civil torts, which was merely means of solving the disagreement between church and former members concerning the large amount of donations, as being the reason for the dissolution order.
また、今回の、解散命令の裁判では、これからもこうした高額献金の問題を起こすだろうというそういう根拠がない 根拠に基づかない推論、さらに、教義や教祖の言動にまで踏み込んで、こうした良くない宗教だからこれからも改善が見込めないだろうという判断をしています。日本の裁判では、これまで教義に踏み込むことはタブーであり、ましてや裁判所が教義の良し悪しを判断することなどありえませんでした。これではまるで裁判所が異端審問官になっています。
Furthermore, the recent ruling court made the ungrounded supposition that the church would continue to cause problems with large donations and even the touched into the doctrines and words of the founder itself, including the founder itself, including that because it is such a bad religion from the origin, no improvement can be expected. So therefore, in Japan, the courts or judicial systems, traditionally it has been taboo to touch or interfere into the doctrines of a religion. But it was unthinkable to us also for courts to judge the merit of the doctrines, of the merits or demerits of the doctrines. This makes it as if the Japanese court has become an inquisitor.
つまりこの解散を命じた決定は完全な不当判決です。およそ厳密な証拠裁判主義に基づく正当な裁判、とは言えず、違法行為の存在が何ら証明できていません。こうした一方的な決定が下された背景に、統一教会をやはりカルトとみなすメディアの著しい変更報道があったことも事実です。
In short, this decision of the dissolution order is completely unjust and unfair. It cannot be considered as a fair trial based on strict evidence. Indeed, no illegal activities has been proven and shown. It is also true that this unilateral decision was made against the backdrop of significant biased media coverage that also views the Unification Church as cult.
どうしたらいいですかね。あと
ごめんなさい。
ちょっと最初の時間の配分となんか全然違う。
そうですね。The time expression 時間。はい。どこに飛びますか。
そうするとですね。
敵対する左翼弁護士の正体。
またそれだけでもすごく時間がかかってしまっちゃうんです。時間かかってしまうので。拉致監禁の問題。はい。時間がない。拉致監禁の問題が一番ちょっとアピールできるかなと思ったんですが、これ要するにどうしたらいいかな。
左翼弁護士団体の正体。
そうですね。どこでした
？14、15ページぐらいですかね。統一教会に敵対する左翼弁護士団体。安倍首相の次ですね。安倍首相殺害の行動、犯行が大バッシングのその次のちょっとページが違うんですよ。
あ、そうですよね。
統一教会に敵対する左翼弁護士団体の正体。
あれ、それどこでしたっけ？17？
近藤さんに聞いてください。すみません。そうそう、17ページ。そちらの。
はい。じゃあ一応ここで。
はい、
これ17ページ。ここですみません。
統一教会に対する。はい、ありがとうござい
ます。統一教会は、1980年代に、韓国から輸入した 多宝塔や大理石壺を原価より大幅に高い価格で売りつけ、暴利を貪っていると社会的な指弾を浴びました。この悪徳商法は、霊感商法と呼ばれ、その被害者を救済するために立ち上がったとされるのが、極左を含む左派系弁護士300人余りの集団である全国霊感商法対策弁護士連絡会、略称全国弁連です。1987年5月に発足したこの全国弁連は、マスコミと連携して、この霊感商法を、詐欺的商法、巨悪と激しく攻撃したため、旧統一教会はすっかり、悪者にされました。
In the 1980s, the Unification Church faced social condemnation for selling imported pagodas and marble vases from Korea at prices far above cost price, making exorbitant profit. This unethical, so-called, business practice was called spiritual sales. And the National Network of the Lawyers Against Spiritual Sales, NNLASS, in Japanese, Zenkoku Benden, a group of the over 300 left-leaning lawyers, including far-left figures, rose up to help the victims of the spiritual sales. Established in May 1987, the NNLASS, in cooperation with the left-leaning media, fiercely attacked these spiritual sales practices as fraudulent business and a major evil, completely demonizing the former Unification Church.
しかし、これらの物品を輸入販売していたのは、統一教会ではなく、信徒の経営する会社でした。被害者数、被害額も全国弁連によって著しく誇張されており、詐欺罪として立件されたことは一件もありません。それどころか、こうした物品を購入してさまざまな奇跡を体験した信者になったという人が複数おり、実際に何人かお会いして取材しました。メディアがこうした人たちの声を一切報道しないという方針を取ったため、かなりねじ曲げられた事実が報道されました。
However, the items were not imported and sold by the Unification Church, but by companies run by members. The number of victims and the amount of damage lost were greatly exaggerated by the NNLASS, and not a single case has been prosecuted as fraud. On the contrary, there are numerous people who purchased these items and experienced various miracles and became believers because of that. And I actually met several of them and interviewed them. Because the media adopted a policy of not reporting these voices at all. The facts that were reported were quite distorted.
一方、輸入販売を行っていた会社は1987年の3月にその大理石壺や多宝塔の輸入販売を取りやめています。以降、被害と取り沙汰された件数は縮小し、安倍元首相が暗殺された当時、霊感商法と呼ばれる販売活動はほぼ存在しませんでした。それにもかかわらず、いまだに統一教会は霊感商法を行っているとして印象操作が行われております。
Meanwhile, the companies that imported these pagodas and sold them has stopped this import operation and therefore stopped in March 1987. Since that time, the number of reported victims or claim has decreased drastically, and at the time of the former Prime Minister's assassination, sales activities referring as the spiritual sales was non-existent. Despite this, the Unification Church continuously it's portrayed as a spiritual sales business organization, and this perception is strongly manipulated in Japan.
Can you tell her to conclude?
はい。じゃあ最後の言葉をお願いしますということです。
困っちゃいましたね。なんか時間の配分が、なんかちょっと、どうなっちゃってる時間の配分。
質問の時間が欲しいからだ
そうなんですか。でもこれじゃあなんか飛び飛びで話がちょっと
質問で解決。
じゃあ最後のここのところだけ、
last sentence。
しかしこの全国弁連の真の発足目的は実は全く別なところにありました。スパイ防止法制定の阻止です。1987年当時、統一教会の関連団体がスパイ防止法成立のための国民運動を行っていました。ところが共産党などの左派、マスコミ関連の組合や教職員組合などはスパイ防止法に激しく反発しました。この全国弁連を共産党系弁護士が多いことから、やはりこの全国弁連も共産党系弁護士が多いことから、やはりスパイ防止法に反対しており、当時全国弁連の中心的存在だった山口博弁護士は、当時、このようにはっきり言っています。
However, this important part, so she wanted to not to miss. However, the true purpose of the NLLSS has actually something totally different. It was to prevent the enactment of the anti-espionage law. In 1987, organizations affiliated with the Unification Church were conducting a nationwide movement for the enactment of the anti-espionage law. However, left-wing groups such as the Communist Party and the Media Labor Union, teachers' unions, and also left-wing lawyers were against anti-espionage law. And the NLLSS, which has many lawyers affiliated with the Communist Party, also opposed officially the anti-espionage law enactment. And the leading lawyer at that time, Hiroshi Yamaguchi, who was a leading lawyer, stated this very clearly.
Thank you, Mrs. Masumi Fukuda, for sharing a small part of your research about what happened to the Unification Church and what were the forces that were behind that discrimination and persecution. And I can testify because in the 15 years ago, I was in Japan. I spent 2 weeks in Tokyo interviewing victims of the church. 4,000 members of the church over several decades had been kidnapped, let's say, abducted by their families to force them into confinement for days, weeks, months, and in the worst case, it was 12 years to Rugoto. And so that they could be deconverted because the family didn't want a brother or a sister or a son to join the Unification Church. And the judicial system never did anything, prosecuted anybody. The same with the police. I was there, I went to police stations, and they say, oh, it's family matter. So, okay, it's like violence between husband and wife in the old days that were never prosecuted. It's the same, it's a family matter. Okay, I will close this parenthesis. Are there any questions that you want to address at this stage to Mrs. Masumi Fukuda? Yeah, you have? Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your presentation. Will your book be published also in English? Because many of the journalists want to know about this.
そうしたいと思っています。そうしたいと思っていますが、今まだその具体的な計画までは行っていません。
So it is her wish to publish in English, but it takes time and effort. So she's really keep hoping.
No, yeah. No, nothing. It's okay. Just speak.
Okay. So I'm impressed by your commitment to unveiling truths and the awards you won in the U.S. and also the reaction of the public to your books. So I'm very happy that you chose to defend the Unification Church in Japan, because I think you are the first and maybe the only one amongst the journalists who did it. And I would like to ask you one question. What was the reaction? Did you get personally attacked? And what was the reaction of, because you talked about NLAS, the group of lawyers, politically motivated lawyers who are behind the whole thing. So what was, did you get personally attacked? What happened? And what's the scene now? And what prevents you from having a larger audience in Japan?
まさに今その全国弁連の中心的メンバーである紀藤正樹弁護士から訴えられています。
Exactly. The leadership person, the lawyer Masaki Kito, has sued her in defamation. So she's directly attacked.
She's in court right now.
Yeah. 今司法裁判闘争中なんですよね。Yes.
Did they try to make her? Sorry. Did they try to make her shut up, or did they try to?
多分というかおそらくそうだと思います。この本が出る直前に訴えてきたので、そうしますと日本の場合例えば新聞の全面広告ができないんですよね。ですからとにかく影響力を削ぐ、ために、訴えたんだと思います。それと彼が訴えた理由というのは、いくつかあるんですけれど、訴えた内容、名誉毀損であると、自分に対しての名誉毀損であるというふうに私は訴えられたわけですが、その大きなあれの名誉毀損だと向こうが言ったその一つは、全国弁連の弁護士たちというのはちょっとこれややこしいんですけれども、ちょっとどうしますかねこれ
She has two reasons. I just stop. Otherwise, actually the report of the kind of sue in her in a defamation came right before the published day. So therefore, if you are sued as a writer, you cannot place the advertisement on the newspapers. So they wanted to really block this book to be spread. So they want to really block the even placing advertisement of the newspapers.
でちょっと付け加えたいんですが、彼は、自分が拉致監禁に関係している、彼は、拉致監禁直接関係はしていませんが、たくさんの信者さんたちが拉致監禁されたことを知っているということを書いたんですよね。で しかし紀藤弁護士は自分は拉致監禁については知らない、関わってないというふうに、そういうふうに言ってます。
So one of the main points of this defamation is that my writing that Masaki Kito, lawyer, he never made his hands dirty in the abduction and confinement and the deprogramming, but he has always connected with the former members, the deprogrammed members, quite direct connections. So therefore, Madame Fukuda wrote, he is connected to the abduction and confinement and deprogramming. So he is related to this deprogramming. He said, correction. She wrote, he knew these former members that he represents were the result of the abduction and confinement. He knew. But he says, I didn't know. So he says, I didn't know that these former members who are suing the Unification Church have been abducted and confined. I didn't know that. But Madame Fukuda said he knew, he must have known. So this he knew, and he says, oh, I didn't know. Yeah. So this is the main kind of argument that we are fighting for in the court.
It was widely known because the case was taken to the United Nations by us, both of us, years ago. But the official answer of Japan was, oh, we don't know anything about it. Just one sentence.
Just one last question, if I can. How do the journalists, the other journalists, how do they, when you say something, what is their reaction? Do they listen to you? You are a journalist too, right? So what is their reaction when you say something? Do they say, oh, my boss doesn't want me to print, or you are lying, or what do they say?
「私はフリーランスなので、まあ自分が書きたいと思えば書けます。でも多くのジャーナリストは組織の一員です。でそうすると日本社会の中で家庭連合というのは統一教会というのはほとんど汚れのような存在になってるんです。これは初めてこの話を聞いた外国人の方には何だか意味わからないと思うんですけれども、家庭連合統一教会を擁護するということはありえないことなんです。で特に組織の一員の場合はもうほぼ無理です。要するにその末端の信者が、真実を報道したいと思っても上司がストップをかけるのでできない。それは私は知っています。
So Madame Fukuda is a freelance journalist, so she can write whatever she wants because she has no superior above her. But most of the journalists are working in an organization or a company, so therefore they have to listen to superior. And in Japan, actually, Unification Church has become dirty thing. So if you protect or stand up for the Unification Church, it is not to do so in the organization especially. So she knows that many journalists, good journalists working for the company's organization, wants to write the truth, but they cannot because of the organizations behind. And you are living in a free country like West and Europe, and you cannot imagine this kind of things can happen. But in Japan, it is impossible to write positive things about Unification Church.
Jacques, you wanted to ask a question?
my question was about a bit similar. There are many people in the world, and even in Japan, who know that Unification Church is a good organization. Many people, many politicians worked with Unification Church before. Why not more of them, I'm talking about politicians, for instance, are not able to raise their voice? Is it, I guess you will give the similar answer, but I want to hear from you, why such silence? This is something very difficult for us to understand.
それはまさに、私もそう思いました。取材を始めて、なんでこのはっきり言ってちっちゃな宗教団体です。それを国家社会を挙げてここまで大バッシングするのは一体なぜなのかっていうことにすごく疑問を持って、多分それが私が家庭連合の取材を始めた原動力になったと思うんですが、ここはね大変難しいところで、とにかく家庭連合について擁護することはタブーになっちゃってるんです。そうなった背景にこの全国弁連という弁護士たちの集団があります。この集団は1987年の5月に組織されたんですが、それ以降日本社会の中にとにかく統一教会っていうのは悪い団体であるということを、そういう社会的スティグマを本当にまめにですね、いろんな日本全国津々浦々にそういう社会的スティグマを植え付けて、で結局一般の私も含めて、私も一般人だった含めて、みんながむしろ彼らに全国弁連に洗脳されてしまった、日本全国が全国弁連に洗脳されてしまったというような、それが実際事実だと思います。
So actually, I was also wondering because many people know I'm working together with politicians and so, but nobody knowing that it is what mass media says is totally of course, but nobody raises a voice. So that is one of the reasons motivated Madam Fukuda to investigate. That kind of she wanted to know why, and the actually Unification Church in Japan is not a big organization, only several tens of thousands of believers, and such a small religious group is bashed by the state, media, social, and nobody can stand and protect them. In Japan, standing up for them is biggest taboo. So that is a situation. So she has been really wondering why it has come so far. And she comes to a certain conclusion. It is done by these leftist lawyers, NLSS, National Network of the Lawyers Against Spiritual Sales. They have been working diligently, spreading lies that the Unification Church is the evil pseudo and the fraudulous organization, religion. So they have been spreading these lies very diligently in different channels. And so years after years, since 1987, so they have planted this stigma quite very well in all over Japan. Even Madame Fukuda had that image before she started to investigate. So she represents average Japanese person. So probably that is the reason. She can call it whole Japan is brainwashed by their lies. So this is conclusion that she has come to.
I think, yes, someone else wanted to take the floor. Yeah, but wait. Lady there, yes. I confirm, it's the same phenomenon in Western Europe. If you defend such groups, non-violent at all, and also useful for society, then you become toxic. That's really the word to be used, toxic. And then nobody approaches you, nobody wants to be on your side, to support you, and people turn their heads off and keep silent. Madam.
Yes. Can you explain in this context what is the anti-espionage law?
まあ、1987年当時、統一教会の関連団体の国際勝共連合が日本でスパイ防止法を、制定しようとして国民運動を続けていたわけですが、それに対して全国弁連は大変反対したし、あとメディアもそうです。いわゆる左の人たちというのはスパイ防止法に激しく反対しました。だから、先ほどちょっと私それちゃんと申し上げなかったんですが、この統一教会を叩くこういう日本での風潮というのはもうイデオロギーとかですね、有神論と無神論、神を信じる人たちと信じない人たち、その、戦い、かなり複雑な戦いでもあって、彼らが今でもそうなん今でも左翼と言われる人たちはスパイ防止法に大変反対してる。
So it was back in 1987. The Unification Church is affiliated political organization. International Victory over Communism has been leading the national movement to enact the anti-espionage law to protect Japan. And then usually left-leaned people were against, like media, and also the National Network of the Lawyers, NLSS, were very much against. So actually this persecution situation is rooted in an ideological conflict or ideological strife, and even deeper, atheism against theism. So it is very deep and complicated roots that she can describe that.
If you want to add some.
それでなぜ左翼がスパイ防止法を反対しているか、今もすごく反対しています。それは彼らが言うには戦前の治安維持法というのが日本にそういう法律がありました。最初は共産主義者を、取り締まる法律だったんですが、それが最後には普通の自由主義者まで投獄されるような拡大したその法律をかなり拡大してしまって大変悪法となった法律があるんですが、それと似てるというふうに言うんですね。ただ当時1987年当時社会党とか共産党はソ連から資金をもらってました。それと社会党は朝鮮総連、北朝鮮とかなり密接なつながりがあった。スパイ防止法を制定したらそういうことが明らかになってしまうのではないか、それを恐れたという、理由も成り立つと思います。
So it is her analysis. Before the World War II, Japan had the called security maintenance law. It was actually to control or prohibit communist activities, but it has been used more widely, and anybody against the government has been also the target of this law. So it was not a good law, bad law. So therefore, that's their argument. This kind of anti-espionage law can be misused to target anybody against the government. But Madam the Fukuda thinks at the 1980s, officially, in a way, Communist Party and also Social Party did receive funding from Soviet Union, Soviet, and also North Korea via the Choson-ryon in Japan. So therefore, once this, at that time, the anti-espionage law is enacted, their activities of the money flow from communist countries would be revealed, and that's not what they want. So this, I guess.
Yeah, last one.
Okay, thank you.
Microphone.
You have the mic, so you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. No, I was just, thank you, Madam, for all your information you gave us. I just want your advice, and I want to know what you think about this. Do you think that there could be a spread against other religions? Because there is a methodology they have used, which is this justification, temple, no temple, church, no church, pray at home or pray somewhere else, you don't have to. But we have a concept that is exactly opposed to this. Religion has to be practiced in the temple, within the temple, not in the street, anywhere, collectively, with rituals, you see?
Please.
So the question is, do you think that what they, Japanese government state did, or Supreme Court did now, could be repeated, a replication against other religions with this pretext, this temple, no temple,
Yeah.
or another pretext, I don't know,
Yeah, another pretext.
or motivation. I mean, let's call it motivation
Good question.
and methodology.
Good question.
日本では伝統的な宗教に対して攻撃はあまりないんです。いわゆる新宗教に対しての、人々のアレルギーがすごく強い。それは一つにはオウム真理教の事件の影響があります。あれこそ、宗教の名前を語ったテロリスト集団だったわけです。
So Japan is traditionally, in general, Japanese people like traditional religions. So there are no very little movement to attack the traditional religion, but kind of allergical reaction to the new religions. So something new is kind of scary or something like this. But the things got worse by Aum truth, Aum Shinrikyo. They are indeed a terrorist group calling themselves a religion. So they made a name of the new religion, very defiled the name of the new religion, unfortunately.
Yeah, thank you. And the last question there, I will just say that when Christianity tried to introduce its own faith in Japan, they were heavily, terribly persecuted. So, as you said, traditional religions, okay, but foreign religions, for them is a problem. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, Ms. Fukuda, you've mentioned a number of cases going back 40, 50 years. But right now in London, there's a great deal of controversy about the hidden work of the Chinese Communist Party and their efforts to subvert democracy, even in the British Parliament. And the subtitle of your book is State-Sponsored Cover-Up, Government Fabrication. And I wonder if you found any evidence of foreign political interference here. As you may know, our church leaders in China are in prison right now. There's a similar campaign in Korea. It seems that this might be more than just Japan. And I'm interested to know if your research has shown any evidence of that type of influence.
今ロンドンでのそういう現象というか、それは私は知らなかったんですよね。ただそう新宗教に対しての、迫害っていうのは多分いつの時代もありましたし、先ほどおっしゃったように日本ではかなり昔伝統宗教であるキリスト教に対しても迫害があったんですけど、ただ日本にとってみたらその時のキリスト教は新宗教だったわけですよ。突然そこ外来外から入ってきた宗教なので、当時は新宗教だった。だからそこで迫害があったわけですけれども、ちょっとそこのところが中国との関係とかですね、私自身のその辺ちょっとはっきりはわからないんですが、フランスなんかでも また何でしたっけ、セクト法などをこう強化しようという動きがあったりして、確かにまあ警戒しなくてはいけない事態だということは分かります。それで韓国の問題もそうですし、はい。
So of course, she's not kind of uh, uh, deep, deepen herself in London and the UK situation. But of course, you just mentioned the persecution on the Christians. Yeah, 400 years ago they were new, right? So they were persecuted. So this is style of Japan. But now 400 years later, they are more established in a way. So also the Korean situation, Japan, and also France, the movement is strong of the Sector Act. It should be strengthened or more stronger or something. She's aware of this. So it is more international kind of movement behind the religious persecution. But she's not expert on that yet, but she has a kind of feeling about that.
Thank you. Thank you so much for all your questions and for answering such in details and a very informative way for us. And now I will give the floor to our last speaker, Patricia Duval, attorney in international human rights law. We have worked together for many years on many cases of religious freedom issues. The floor is yours.
I'll try to be concise because we've gone into many details, and I just want to make a few remarks to conclude. On the well, like Willie just said, we were aware of the deprogramming issues. In 2013, we filed a report at the UN about it, and it had been lasting for decades. It had been lasting for decades, and they were building, we didn't know that, they were building all the civil cases that they based themselves on, they relied on, to afterwards request dissolution. But we were not aware of it. We were aware that there was a problem with human rights and freedom issues because people were being deprogrammed on a regular basis. And for 40 years, nearly half a century, actually, they were kidnapped and confined by their parents, although they were adult members. But the Japanese society is a lot based on family authority, meaning that if the ancestors, I mean the family heads don't like the religious choice of their relatives, then they are trying to find solutions. They were trying to find solutions, and you had these politically motivated lawyers who made a pact with a branch of the Protestant Church, who were seeing the Unification Church as a competitor. So they made an alliance, and it was published in the media. And they made an alliance to reach the destruction, the elimination of the Unification Church. That was said openly. And they went on with their plan. I mean, they went on deprogramming adult members, and they went on, they were giving instructions to the parents to abduct their relatives and confine them. How to confine them, how to block the windows, how to block the doors, what to do, what deprogrammer to address, mostly inside amongst the Protestant pastors, who would then persuade them that the beliefs of the Unification Church, although it's a Christian church, but they were then putting pressure on the members, saying that it was not true Christianity, it was not conformed to the Bible, and so on. It was a heresy process. It was really a heresy process with the blessing of the Japanese government. Sorry, and with the blessing of the Japanese government, and this is where it's illegal under international human rights law, because the state has a duty of neutrality in religious matters. So it was completely illegal that they would let this happen and even endorse it or giving it a blanc-seing, And the police would not intervene. It was a family matter, and there was no prosecution. And the first case that was won in court, in civil court, was Torugoto, who had been confined for 12 years. He came out, he was like, he was bony. He was really like, they threw him on the pavement after 12 years because he would not abandon his faith. And they saw they could do nothing with him, and they had spent enormous amounts of monies renting flats and doing all what the deprogrammers had said to do, and it got nowhere because he was so stubborn in his faith. And so he resisted, and after a while they had spent all their savings. The family had spent a fortune to the deprogrammers, and they finally threw him on the pavement one day, and he was nearly dying, and then he had to stay in hospital for weeks to recover, and then he wrote a book which has been translated into English now, and he won a case. Mostly he won a case for the first time at the Tokyo High Court and got damages, and the Tokyo High Court said it was illegal practice and confirmed by the Supreme Court. That was in 2014, and that happened because also we had taken the case to the UN, and the UN Human Rights Committee had issued a recommendation to Japan, an official recommendation to put an end to it. It was not a recommendation. They demanded, they urged Japan to put an end to this practice. Then Japan was ashamed. They don't like to be ashamed. Anyway, so that was the only thing that made them react. First, they said, "Oh, it's not true. We're not aware. It's not true. We never heard of it."
Yeah.
Then we replied. We filed evidence, and then there was this official recommend, because first there's it's a review by the UN Human Rights Committee. So first we had it included in the list of issues to be taken up with Japan. They replied they didn't know about it. Then we filed evidence, and affidavits by the lawyer of the church, who is still the lawyer Fukumoto. He testified at the UN. And then there was an official recommendation against Japan. Then, for the first time, miraculous, he got damages in court. They had to do something. So they did. But then the lawyers against spiritual sales were continuing, unfortunately. So I thought, well, this case is closed, That was in 2014. But then 10 years later, Kondo calls me and says, now we have a dissolution case based on all the deprogrammed cases that they filed, because now we have 32 lost civil cases, and they asked for dissolution based on that, right? So I said, what? And then we started working on it in 2024. And exposing that all these cases had been fabricated, and they were civil tort cases. So now they base themselves on the law on religious corporations in Japan, which says if you have infringed the law and you have caused a lot of harm to public welfare, then you can be dissolved. But first, they hadn't broken the law. It was civil torts, which is not breaking any regulation. It's just a tort. It's just a judge saying, between two private parties, okay, you hurt him and you you have to pay some damages. But it's not a fact-finding judge. They are in civil. It's a civil matter. So, but still, they used that to say, okay, you broke the law, which was not true. And then they changed the jurisprudence. The Supreme Court said, okay, civil tort is a kind of breaking the law. Well, okay, well, kind of. But it's not under international law anyway. And then they said, okay, it caused a lot of harm to public welfare because lots of families and people were not happy about it. Public welfare. You caused trouble to public welfare because a lot of people even had to resort to deprogramming to get them to think straight, and then you caused a lot of trouble to all these people. But this is not what freedom of religion is all about. I mean, as far as an adult member, he has the right to choose the religion of his choice or her choice. So, of course, it was going right opposite to what human rights, international human rights law said. And this is what he meant by ICCPR. It stands for International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. And this is the treaty that has been signed internationally for religious freedom in particular, for all human rights. And Japan is part of it and has ratified it and should be going by that covenant. And under the covenant, you cannot say that religious choice is not conform to what it should be like. And what the Japanese courts have ruled is that donating to the church was not conform to social norms. And they lost all their civil cases on this basis. They were not conformed to social norms. But what is a social norm in matter of religion? What is the norm in religious choice? There's no norm. This is the point. But in Japan, this is enough to say the social norm is kind of above the law. If you say it violates social norms, then you can do whatever you want. And this has to be changed because it's not conform to human rights. Anyway, and the second part that is not conform is this thing of public welfare. Like you have a list of exceptions to freedom of religion or belief on which a government can rely to limit freedom of religion or belief, such as public safety, public order, health matters, or fundamental rights of others. Well, public welfare is not there. Public welfare is too wide. It can encompass nearly anything. It's completely arbitrary. Like in Russia, for example, Putin has invented the concept of spiritual security. Yeah. Spiritual security. Then it means if you're not the Orthodox Church, you cannot have freedom of religion in Russia, because the security, the spiritual security of the Russians needs the Orthodox Church, which is close to the power, to be in power.
This book edited by both of us.
Yeah.
Those who want it can get it.
Anyway, so that's and Japan is going the same way as a country like Russia, like saying public welfare. Now it's spiritual security. Now we have public welfare, and what they say in Japan is, when we raised the argument, because we obtained this time on 1st August 2025, a press release by the UN stating that the dissolution was not confirmed, and the dissolution was not yet confirmed by the Supreme Court. And the 4 special rapporteurs from the UN Human Rights Council on religion, on freedom of association, on freedom of education, and on freedom of expression. The 4 of them, they published a press release saying the dissolution of Unification Church is not conformed to international human rights law. And still, because it's based on public welfare and social norms, and still the courts ignored it because there's such a political will behind that they ignored it, and they went on with what they were doing, hoping that nobody would notice the press release from the UN. But this is completely against the international human rights law. And what they said is basically public order, it's against public order. It goes into the limitations in the covenant. It's a possible limitation because it means it's against public order. But it's not true. I mean, public order in international human rights law is to be interpreted very narrowly. It means Aum Shinrikyo was a matter of public order, that typically. It means it's a matter of law and order. What they say is public order for them is social norms. But it's not true. It's not true. Public order is not social norms. So they extend what they want to do, and this is the risk with other countries, is to extend the concept of public order to limit freedom of religion or belief. Then in the name of public order, you can say this religion we can keep and this one we cannot. But this is completely opposite to the spirit of the human rights treaties after Second World War. And all these countries, all these states, they have to be reminded of their commitments, of what they said after Second World War, oh, never again. So now we are saying, okay, it's very limited restrictions to these human rights. But in fact, there is a tendency to go and extend the concept of public order. And it's very dangerous because right now, South Korea is looking at Japan and trying to use it to pass a new law on dissolution of religious organizations, saying, oh, you see, in Japan, they got in trouble because the Unification Church was doing a lot of lobby with politicians. So we are going to pass a law in South Korea saying, okay, you are getting close to politicians, so it's a matter of public order, and we have to pass a law on dissolution. This is how they jailed a poor religious leader of 95 and the Mrs. Moon of Unification Church, who is 83, and she is in a cell, 2 square meter cell with no wheelchair when she would need one. This is torture, and this is unacceptable. And they do all this in the name of public order. And religious liberty has a price. If we're not vigilant, if we don't fight for it, they just sneak in with new concepts. Oh, this is public order, and you don't pay attention. People who are not very religious, they don't know what it means. They don't pay attention. And it's the erosion of their liberties, and they don't not even aware of it. But this is very, this is our work, is to awaken people and societies about what's going on and really what it means. And this whole story about Japan and South Korea is a serious issue, And this is why the United Nations have been taken a stand about it, and they might come up with a new stand about it, and I hope so, because it's not the end of it. I mean, we just published a report called The Purge, After Dissolution, The Purge. They want to re-educate the children at school against their parents' faith. This is another form of deprogramming.
And they are targeting Jehovah's Witnesses on that basis now.
Exactly.
So they are using other angles now to attack other religious groups.
So you see, it's not a matter of legal entity. Who cares? No. It's not a matter of legal entity. It's a matter of eradication of the faith itself. Because these people, like Quito, he's completely perverted guy. He doesn't believe in faith at all. I think maybe it makes him have a reaction when he hears about religion. Well, that's his problem. I mean, and anyway, they are going for, because they said, okay, well, dissolution is good. Well, it took time, but it's good. But now the problem is that individuals can continue to practice their faith.
Yeah.
They say that in the media. How can they dare? So we have to go further and to continue at the UN, because the fight is for freedom of religion or belief. It's not for a legal entity. It's for the right to practice faith, to have to raise children in your own faith, no matter what they say. They want the government to decide what the children should think.
Yeah.
Well, this goes against also the treaties that were signed after Second World War. The parents have a right to educate their children according to their own faith.
And this is a very serious angle of attack against religions, and that will reach major religions afterwards. Of course, They start with small, vulnerable, weak movements who cannot defend themselves, and then once they create a jurisprudence, they use it for other groups. And that's what will happen, and that's what may happen now with the Unification Church in other countries, not only in South Korea and in Japan, but in Europe. You can be sure that a number of anti-cult organizations and governments will see how can we get rid of the Unification Church in Europe. It's a cult, it's dangerous, it's harmful, it's totalitarian, it is exploiting their members financially. But what was never said in Japan is that the so-called deprogrammers, they were being paid by the families. They were charging the families for their so-called services, really exploiting them financially, and there was never any prosecution against them.
Yeah, exactly. And it's really, I just want to stress one last thing is the Supreme Court, in order to confirm dissolution, relied on two things. First, they couldn't find any crimes, so they relied on civil torts because they couldn't find any crimes. Second, they said there was no personal enrichment, no profit making. So what did they say? They said, they were pressing the Japanese people to finance humanitarian charitable activities in other parts of the world, in Africa and so on. And so what? I mean, this is very, very good. I mean, to find but they don't even realize, you know what I'm saying? And so they are playing on the card of the Japanese who don't want to be, okay, I've been fooled, I've been paying for Africa because, and so what? I mean, you know, Japan has already a bad image on the international scene because they're not very friendly with foreigners, and so the endless lawyers were pushing in the media that the Japanese were fooled around paying for charitable activities, and then creating all this bad image for the church, when actually they were accusing it of being criminal, when actually it was doing the opposite. I mean, this is really incredible what happened, and the Japanese public has followed that. But I just wanted to stress that so you understand what to what point it can get, where stigmatization in the media results in absurd reactions about a group that has no personal enrichment and no crimes. That's all I have to conclude about. And so we have to go on with denouncing exposing the purge, and the fight for faith and the freedom to have faith. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Patricia. Really very, very useful to have that other perspective, purely legal analysis of all the illegalities committed in Japan. And I thank you, each of you, everybody, all of you, for attending this conference and for contributing with your questions that you can go on asking now, but out of the framework of the conference individually with the speakers. Thank you very much.
Yes.